Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to the channel. I am here today with my January wrap-up, where I'm going to talk about all of the books I read for the month of January 2020. So, let's dive right in. I am going to talk about these in the order I completed them. So the first book I read in 2020 is David Sedaris' Calypso. This is the first David Sedaris book I ever read, and I guess you would call it a memoir. I think in my spreadsheet I classified it as humor, but it is a very funny memoir, essentially, of that David Sedaris wrote. It is, I would say it's aimed at a bit of an older audience. I feel like it's aimed at kind of my parents' age, who, you know, they're in their early 60s, because that's the age he is when he writes this book. This is from 2018. I read this via audiobook on Audible. It is in my personal collection. I bought it as like an Audible deal of the day sometime within the past 2 months here or so. So it was very recent. I've only read one other memoir in my life that I can think of, and that was from my favorite voice actor of all time, H. Jon Benjamin, who plays Archer in that show, and then of course, most importantly, he is Bob from Bob's Burger, which is my favorite animated show of all time. So he's fantastic, and his book, which is called Failure is an Option, was absolutely hilarious. I mean, he is such a funny writer, and he does the narration for the audiobook, and he's perfect. It is a fantastic audiobook. I absolutely recommend it if you haven't read that one, and you like Bob's Burgers or Archer, or you just want a funny memoir. That's a really good one. But that's the reason I picked up Calypso, was because I read that one and liked it. I've heard a ton of good things about David Sedaris, and I wanted to give him a shot. So I thought, I saw this as a daily deal, and I figured, what the hell, let's pick it up. Why not? For whatever reason, I put it on, you know, I think it was January 2nd when I was driving back to work, and I thought it was very funny. I didn't laugh out loud as much as I did when I was reading H. Jon Benjamin's book, but it was very humorous. It was a very funny memoir. And like I was saying earlier, it really feels like it's probably aimed at a couple generations older than I am. You know, like I said, my parents are in their early 60s, and I feel like they would have appreciated this just as much as I did, if not a little bit more. But that said, I still feel like the themes and ideas that Sedaris talks about are very universal, and so because of that, I was still able to connect with what he was talking about and kind of the message that he was not preaching, but the message that he was relaying to his reader. And it was really well done. I gave this one 4 stars, so clearly I enjoyed it. So that was the first book I finished in 2020. It was David Sedaris' Calypso. I definitely recommend it. The second book I read this month was The Institute by Stephen King. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in this one because there is a full video review of this book right here on the Cinefessions YouTube channel. So if you're interested in my deep thoughts on that one, they're not deep at all, but if you're interested in more thoughts on that one, definitely check out that review. I will try to put that up in the card. I never use cards, so it's one of these two sides. I'll try to put that up in the card so you can click on that if you do want to watch that review. But I will say this book was released in 2019, and I read it via audiobook thanks to Scribd. And I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it. It was fantastic. And I thought for sure that this was a sign of great things to come for 2020 when my second book of the year is my first 5-star read. So I was really happy with this one. This is about a boy who he's incredibly intelligent. He's only like 12 years old, and he's getting ready to go to 2 separate universities at the same time. He is a bona fide genius, but in the middle of the night, his parents are killed, and he wakes up, he's kidnapped, and he wakes up in this titular institute. The room looks identical to his at home, except something is off. Everything's a bit newer than he's used to, and things are just off. It's not his room, clearly. And then it's just the story of, you know, how him and the group around him try to escape from this institute. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite King books I've read. It ranks up there with It as being, like I said, one of my favorites. It's just a really, really well done story by Stephen King that is absolutely recommended. So far, my favorite book of the year. We'll see if that continues as the months roll on, but I would be shocked if it doesn't end up in, you know, my top 10, if not my top 3 by the end of 2020. So, second book of the year was The Institute by Stephen King. The third book I finished this past month was a graphic novel, and this is Just Beyond the Scare School, written by R.L. Stine. I don't know who drew this one. I guess Kelly and Nicole Matthews were the artists behind this one. This is a book that I got from Chris for Christmas, actually. Chris is another Cinefessions contributor, which I mention on probably every video, so I feel like I don't need to keep saying that. But either way, this, like I said, was a Christmas gift from him, and I'm very thankful for that. That said, I didn't love this one, which is kind of how he felt about it as well. He said it was fine, and it's fine. This is a story of these kids here. They basically find out that there's like another, I don't know, I guess it's another dimension where there is their same school, but kind of bass-ackwards. Things are not as, they don't have it as easy in the other school as they do here. It's this other, like I said, another dimension, and it's just strange. Obviously, the audience for this is middle grade, and so I can appreciate that, but even that said, there's just not a whole lot to love here. The art style looks fine, nothing to really write home about. This one never really gripped me as I was going through it. I didn't really care about it too much. Some of the ideas are interesting, but as it kind of wraps up, it feels like it's being rushed along just to get to the finish. And then once you're at the end of it, it's just kind of silly. And I guess it's what you would expect from like a Goosebumps style graphic novel, but it wasn't quite as good as I was hoping it was going to be. I ended up giving Just Beyond the Scare School 2 out of 5 stars. And I'm sure if I was reading this when I was in middle school, you know, when I should have been actually reading middle grade, I probably would have enjoyed it more. But just as someone reading it today for the first time, I think it's fine. I didn't really like it all that much, so I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. The next disappointment on my list was The Green Lantern, Volume 1, Intergalactic Lawman. This was written by Grant Morrison, and it was the art is by Liam Sharp. So this collects issues 1 through 6 of the Green Lantern series from Grant Morrison. I don't know what year this was, I guess. It's recent because this hardcover just came out, I believe, in the middle of 2019. But this was, I was confused as all hell. Like I said in my TBR video for January, I know very little about Green Lantern. I've seen the movie, but I don't really remember much about it. And aside from that, I know Green Lantern from the Injustice series, which I love, but I couldn't really tell you anything about him. This one is about... I don't even really know what it was about. You know, at one point, I think it was like 2 or 3 issues, and I finally got an idea of what they were doing. You know, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan is basically, you know, he's a cop of the galaxy. That's kind of what the Green Lanterns are. And there is an auction that's going on that's selling planet Earth to the highest bidder. And so he's trying to stop that, and this is the worst synopsis ever, because I really don't even know. So it says, let me just read the back here. It says, when Green Lantern Hal Jordan encounters an alien hiding in plain sight, it sets off a chain of events that rocks the Green Lantern Corps to its foundations. There's an intergalactic conspiracy afoot, and a traitor within the Corps must be pulling the strings. Then, the Earth itself has vanished and been put up for auction to a buyer whose claim may be impossible to break without Hal violating the Lantern's most cherished rule. This one was super disappointing. I gave this one 2 stars, and the reason that it earned both of those stars was because of the art style. It is fantastic. Liam Sharp does such a wonderful job. I don't know if I've ever seen a more detailed art style than I have in this graphic novel. It's fantastic. But for me, which again, I am a complete noob when it comes to Green Lantern, so I know nothing. So take what I'm saying with the largest grain of salt you can think of. For me, the art was not worth it because the story that Grant Morrison was telling was just so god dang confusing that I couldn't follow it along at all. So if you are like me and you are coming into this with very little or limited knowledge of Hal Jordan of Green Lantern, you probably want to skip this one. I just don't think it's worth your time because if you're anything like me, you're just going to be confused and disappointed at the end of the day. So 2 out of 5 stars, Intergalactic Lawman Volume 1, Green Lantern. Not my favorite of the month, that's for sure. And I didn't mention it, but Green Lantern was a library pickup for me for January, so I didn't spend any money on it, fortunately. So I did pick it up from my library instead. Next up on the list is another one that I have a full review of here on the channel, so definitely check that out if you're interested. This one is Sadie, written by Courtney Summers, and this was released in 2018. This is another one I read via audiobook thanks to Scribd. I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars also. So I think that's 3 in a row now where I gave 2 out of 5 stars. So I have my 5-star read, and then I have a few not so great reads. This one was disappointing because of the hype that it received and kind of my own expectations that I had coming into it, just because of everything I've heard about it. This one tells the story of basically half of it is a podcast of this guy trying to track down what happened to the titular Sadie. And the other half of the book is Sadie's story and kind of what happens to her as she tries to track down the person that she believes killed her little sister. It's a very dark, grim story. And the whole thing just felt forced and false to me. I think I said those words a ton in my review, but I don't know. I'm not going to say much more about it because, like I said, I did do a full review on it, so definitely check that out if you are interested. I gave Sadie, like I said, 2 out of 5 stars. Next up on my list is one of the very few books that I actually was assigned and completed in high school, but that's likely because it was so short. But this one was Night, written by Elie Wiesel. This is a harrowing take on Wiesel's experience through the Holocaust as a young boy. Him and his whole family were taken into a concentration camps, and then just the most horrific things ever you could imagine were done to them. So this is such a sad and important book because it gives a very graphic but very detailed look at just the horrors of the Holocaust and what Hitler and the Nazis did to these individuals. I don't need to say too much about this one because everyone knows this book. It would be criminal to give this thing anything less than 5 stars, which is exactly what it deserves and what I gave it. I probably won't read a more important book than this one throughout the entire year. So I'm very glad I revisited this because it gave me a whole new perspective now, you know, just being a father now and being older so I can appreciate what's going on in this book even more, which makes it even sadder and even more horrific. But it's so important to remember these stories and make sure that they never die. So I gave Night 5 stars. This one is required reading for any individual that's on planet Earth. This one is too important to miss. So definitely read this one if you, for whatever reason, have not. It is super short, but very, very well done. I will also mention that I read this one via audiobook as well, and that was on Scribd. So anything I mention on Scribd, I will leave a link down below. You can click that link and get 60 free days of Scribd. That also gives me a free month. It doesn't give me any cash or any money, but it does give me a free month of Scribd, which I would very much appreciate if you do want to support the channel. So I'll leave that link down below in case you do want to try Scribd for 60 days. Next up on the list is another audiobook that I finished this month thanks to Scribd, and it is Howls Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This is one that I know of the title because of the Studio Ghibli film, and it's one that I didn't even know there was a book about it until recently, but I saw it on Scribd, and so I wanted to give it a shot as something much different than Night, just something to kind of lighten the mood a little bit for my drives to and from work. I didn't love this book, unfortunately. I thought it was fine, but it didn't do much to capture my imagination like I expected it to. This tells the story of, there's 3 sisters, and I think the father dies if I remember right, and the mother, who owns a hat shop in this little village, decides that she can't afford to keep all of them around or keep all of them going to their classes and basically keep them all on the same track that they're on. Instead, she sends them on their 3 separate ways. One of them stays at the shop, though, to continue making hats. Well, she's so good at making hats that the witch finds out about her and is basically pissed off because she's taking business from her. I think is how this goes. This is probably all wrong and I apologize, but this is what I remember it being. The witch basically curses her, and so it's this young girl who's probably, I don't know, 18, 19, somewhere in there. She now turns into this 90-year-old woman, or this, you know, late 80s looking woman. And so she decides that she's going to visit the wizard, who is Howl, which is strange because Howl is, the rumor around town is that Howl basically survives by taking the souls of the young women in the village. So the fact that she goes to visit him is strange, but either way, so she goes to the castle and she runs into this flame. Apparently it is another entity that has been trapped in this flame for so long, and it wants out also. So she wants to be young again, and the flame wants out of this fire. I don't know how to explain that, but whatever. So they make a deal to help each other out, and it's going to take a month or so for this to happen. So she's going to live in the castle and act as the maid of the castle. So when Howl comes back, then, you know, she'll say that she's the maid and she's there to clean up. I don't know. The whole thing, I'm probably explaining it very, very poorly, but that's kind of the gist of it. And then, of course, it's how these two are going to help each other. That's the story that we're following, and, you know, the story of Howl himself. As you can tell, this one did not stick with me very much at all. I don't even know if I can tell you specifically how this book ended, because I just was so disconnected from it by the end of it that I didn't really care. I didn't like this one. I'm sure a lot of people do, and that's great. This is another one I gave 2 out of 5 stars. I'm not going to keep belaboring the point. I just didn't like it. So, Howl's Moving Castle, 2 out of 5 stars. Next on the list is the only physical book I read that was not a graphic novel, and this is R.L. Stine's The Babysitter 3. This is another one where there is a full review available, this on Cinefessions.com in written form, as opposed to here on the channel, but I was very surprised by this one. I thought it was just really well done. The kind of twists and turns in this one are better than in the first two. I think this is the best book in the series so far. The Babysitter 3 is about Jenny, once again, who is still trying to overcome the problems that she's having mentally with the events of Babysitter 1. To do that, she decides to take her mother up on the idea of visiting her cousin Deborah out in the country. So she does that, but turns out that her cousin has taken a babysitting job for the summer. So everything's fine until her cousin starts getting the same phone calls that she was getting, and then things get weird. So I'm not going to say anything more because obviously I don't want to spoil the first 2 books or this one, but check out my reviews on Cinefessions.com for all 3 books so far in the series. And then in February, as I mentioned in my February TBR, I will be completing this series with The Babysitter 4. So I gave Babysitter 3 4 out of 5 stars. Apparently, I was on a graphic novel kick this month because I read another graphic novel. This is another one I picked up from the library. This is Ice Cream Man Volume 1, and I forget the subtitle of the book, Rainbow Sprinkles. So basically this is kind of an anthology graphic novel series. Each issue is basically self-contained, but there is an overarching story that is the Ice Cream Man himself. He's kind of the link between all the stories. This was really interesting. There are some issues in here. This actually only has 4 issues, which I thought was really strange. Usually these collections have at least 5, normally 6, sometimes 7, but it's the first one I've actually seen with only 4 issues. But either way, the issues, there were 2 that I really loved, 1 that I liked, and 1 that I thought was just okay. But the ones that I loved, I really loved. They were so well done. I want to try to find a cool page here. So I finally found a decent page. Just to give you an idea of the art style, this is kind of what it looks like. The stories are basically this Ice Cream Man is delivering ice cream to people, and he is evil, clearly. Things happen. There's so many different stories. There's 4 different stories that are so separate from one another that I can't possibly... I don't want to go through all of them, of course, but the back of the book says that Ice Cream Man is a genre-defying series of disparate tales of sorrow, wonder, and redemption. Each installment features its own cast of strange characters dealing with their own special Sundays of suffering, which is really accurate to what it is. So if you are... I know I'm doing a terrible job of selling this, but if you are interested in horror or sci-fi and you like anthology TV shows in general, then I think you'll like this. If you like graphic novels, you will also like this anthology graphic novel series. It's really well done in most parts. Some of the stories, like I said, are lacking, but for the most part, the majority of these, so 3 out of 4 of these, were really, really cool and really worth reading. So Ice Cream Man Volume 1, I thought I might have liked this one a little bit more than I did, but I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars, so clearly I enjoyed it. Check this one out. I don't know if I'd recommend purchasing it, but if you can get it from your library, do that first to make sure you like it before you start spending money on the series. So next up on my list is a nonfiction book called The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, and this was written by Stephen Brusetti. Or Stephen Brusat, I don't know exactly how to say his last name, but he's the one who wrote it. So this is one that I've heard championed from Hardback Hoarder, who is one of the 5 booktubers I mentioned in my underrated booktuber video that I did earlier in the year. Because of that, I wanted to give this one a shot, and I did this one via audiobook on Scribd again, and I enjoyed it. I don't know if it's one I would ever bother revisiting again or would suggest to everybody, but if you are someone that has an interest in the history of dinosaurs and kind of the most accepted, from what I could tell at least, the most widely accepted theories on what happened to the dinosaurs and kind of their habitats, worth I don't know, just the whole life and death of the dinosaurs, then definitely check this book out. I can't say that I've read other books to compare this to, but it does tell the story of the dinosaurs in an entertaining enough way. It wasn't quite as fast-paced as I was expecting. It wasn't quite as entertaining, I guess, as I was expecting, but it seems very factual, at least to someone who doesn't really know much about it. It seems very intelligent, and I, definitely learned some things, and so I appreciated it for that. But, it is what it is. It's a nonfiction book about the rise and the fall of the dinosaurs, so there's not really much else to say. I ended up giving this one 3.5 out of 5 stars, and if it sounds like something you might be interested in, then definitely check it out. And like I said, it is available on audiobook on Scribd. The last book on my list is actually one that I put in my February TBR video because I was expecting to read it in the month of February, but I started it and finished it all in one night a couple days ago, so that was still the month of January. So unfortunately it didn't make it to February, but I can talk about it now, and it is Bottomfeeders, and this is written by Ezra Clayton Daniels and Ben Passmore. So, as I mentioned in my February TBR video, this is one that is from an author of a book I read last year called Upgrade Soul, another graphic novel. And it's very similar art style, very similar. Here, I'll show some of the body horror, which is the reason I picked it up, because that's how it was described in the reason I heard about this was because it was on the top 10 graphic novel list by Comics Bookcase. And they mentioned that it was body horror and sci-fi, which is right up my alley. And then, as I was doing my February TBR video, I discovered that it was written by the same author of Upgrade Soul, which was a book I really, really enjoyed last year. And so I was really excited to get to this one, so much so that I didn't even wait to February. I ended up finishing it in January. But this was not quite as good as Upgrade Soul, I'll be honest, but it was still very enjoyable. It is super quick. There's not a whole hell of a lot of dialogue. Like, for example, that's one page. The artwork is really well done. It's very stylized, as I've been showing, but the story itself, so basically, this one girl moves into this cheaper apartment complex in basically what I could tell is the ghettos of Chicago, and there is weird things going on in the building. People are moving out, which is why the landlord's trying to bring in new, younger crowd to raise the rent and whatnot, to make it appeal to more people, essentially. But there is something going on in the basement, I'll say, and I don't want to say much more than that to give spoilers, but if you enjoy body horror, if you enjoy sci-fi, if you are looking at this and you think you like this art style, if you've read Upgrade Soul, I would definitely recommend this one. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars, where I gave Upgrade Soul either 4 or 4.5. Well, I was only using a 4-star scale back then, so I probably gave it 3.5. But it's not, like I said, it's not quite as good, but it's well done. It's enjoyable to read. It is a super quick read. Like I said, I never start something and finish it in the same day. This one I did in just a matter of like less than 2 hours. It's a quick read, so I don't know if I'd purchase it, but I would definitely recommend borrowing it from your library, which is what I did. So, Bottomfeeders by Ezra Clayton Daniels and Ben Passmore, I gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. All right, so that's going to do it for all the books I read in January. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you read last month? What stood out to you? What was bad? What was good? Whatever. What did you read last month? If you like this video, please consider subscribing. If not, thank you anyway for watching. I really appreciate it. All right, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll catch you next time. So we're going to do this again so that I sound a little more like what I know what I'm talking about. So let's do it again.